Good evening. A very warm welcome to you all tonight. It's lovely to see you. Thank you for coming out here to Emmanuel Church. My name is Paul. I'm one of the ministers here, and you are in for a real treat this evening. First of all, can we just show our appreciation for all those who have got our tech ready, who gave us tea and coffee, and who have made this place warm and comfortable. Much needed tea and coffee, so thank you very much all those who did that. Volunteers for washing up can come and speak to me afterwards. Kat will say more about this in a bit, but we're doing a couple of buckets and baskets for donations tonight for the causes that Kat has been raising money for. So just rustle your hands in your pockets and handbags and feel some loose change and notes. For those of you who go, well, I don't carry cash anymore, we have a card reader. We'll have money off you any way you like. So have that ready and we'll collect up our donations and we'll release whatever total that is at a later date. Just one important thing to do as well. I hope you are all in good voice this evening as well, partly because Cole Moreton, where are you, Cole? Cole is going to be asking and facilitating some questions towards the end of this evening. So during Kat's presentation, you can be thinking about any questions or thoughts, observations you have that you can put to Kat through Cole. And your good voice is needed because it's a special person's birthday this evening and we need to sing aloud to Kat's mother, Joyce, who has given up her birthday evening is to be here this evening. So please can we sing to Joyce? Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Joyce, happy birthday to you. Speech after. And then finally, welcome to Kat. I have introduced preachers and ministers. I've introduced bands. I've introduced speakers. I've introduced dancers. I've introduced choirs and all sorts of people. I have never, ever introduced a dentist before, or anyone who has been to the South Pole, much less only the 13th woman to do so. So Kat, you are very welcome and we're all very much looking forward to your evening. So welcome and thank you. And I should say, given that you've been to Morecambe, Ocklinge and Cavendish, it's welcome back.
Yes, this is definitely coming back home, it feels like. Can you all hear me? Yeah, brilliant. I'm not good on the old mic stuff. Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit nervous. I don't normally get nervous, but there are actually some familiar faces here tonight, so that gets me a little bit jittery. But yes, you're all going to have a good night because you're all just looking at my holiday snaps. And we'll start with this one. So this is me, as it was mentioned, in January I became the 13th woman to ski solo and unsupported to the South Pole. It didn't just happen like that, there was a lot that went into it. But this is a photo at the start and at the end of my journey, and you can see the energy that I had at the beginning, full of excitement, and how it was somewhat lacking at the end. I include this because the start of that journey really felt like a finish line to me. That was the real unknown. How was I going to actually get there? I really had no idea how to do it. So once I got to the start line, I really felt like I'd accomplished something. And after that, people say it's just the victory lap to the South Pole, but I tend to disagree. It was slightly more than that. So I'm going to split this evening into two parts. The first part's going to be that kind of build up, how I got myself to the South Pole, how I trained to get there. And then there'll be literally a 10-minute comfort break for me just before we then get to Antarctica. So just hang on in there. We do get to the South Pole in the end. But this is basically talking you through the route. And I thought I'd start by just explaining what's the North Pole, what's the South Pole, because I get lots of questions about that. North Pole is on sea. So if you go to the North Pole, you'll be on the sea, and then there's ice above the sea ice. So that North Pole is always moving. South Pole is on the continent, Antarctica, so it's solid. It's still moving because it's on a glacier, and that whole continent is covered in ice. And in areas, that ice is about 3 miles thick. It averages about 1.5 miles. So you see little mountains kind of popping through the ice there. My journey was from the edge of the continent of Antarctica to the South Pole. It's 704 miles in total. I actually skied at least 708 because they failed to tell me that they were going to be dropping me off not quite at my start line. So I had about 4 miles ski to get to the start line, simply because the ice was too dangerous to land a plane on near the start line, so I landed on some sea ice. There was a lot that kind of planning that went into it that I didn't know about. You're not allowed to just land at Antarctica and say that you're going to do this. You've got to apply to be able to do it, and then you've got to kind of prove that you're going to be able to do it as well. There's a company called Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, and there's one man in particular who will give you the green light or not, and he follows every part of your training to check that you're going to be safe, not only for yourself, but he doesn't want any of his staff to have to kind of come out and risk their lives trying to rescue me. So they really kind of grill you for a long time. You get to know them very well. So I kind of worked out how I was going to build my polar CV, that kind of list of accomplishments to get me there. And then my biggest challenge was kind of how I was going to pay for it all. I know people say dentists drive around in all these cars. It's not like that these days. It's really not. That's the old guys. We have to work a lot harder for our cash. And if you do stuff like this, you find that you've never got really a positive bank balance. So I had to find some sponsorship and get used to kind of hearing nothing back. Lots of emails and things. So I'll talk you through that. You're not going to get a kind of whole story of my life, but this is basically me at 14. This was actually me just the day before I left Eastbourne. I'm sitting on the kitchen counter, actually about to say goodbye to some friends. But this was the age at which Antarctica entered my mind, and this is how long I've been wanting to go there. And this lady, Mrs. Taylor, is one of the reasons why is one of the main reasons why Antarctica came to me at this age. This is 1994. I'm 14. You can do the maths. And it was one geography lesson with Mrs. Taylor where she was talking about deserts. And I love geography. I wondered why I didn't do geography instead of dentistry, but that's a whole other story. But she asked us what the largest desert in the world was. And everyone was putting hands up, you know, Sahara, Gobi Desert, Kalahari. And she didn't say anything. She just put a big picture up on the screen of this vast white wilderness and said, "This is the largest desert on Earth." And I can remember exactly where I was sitting when she said that, and instantly my mind just went, I need to go there. And she was someone that would be bouncing off the walls with enthusiasm about everything. She was one of those great teachers that really got you enthusiastic and took you on all the field trips and stopped off at McDonald's in the school minibus and, you know, did all the fun stuff. And I actually stayed in contact with Mrs. Taylor for quite a while after I finished school. I went back there and did a talk about some other work that I'd been doing, some humanitarian dental work. But we kind of drifted apart and lost contact when I was in my mid-20s. And it wasn't until lockdown in 2020 when I actually started to realise that, you know, this dream had been sitting in my mind and maybe I should be doing something about it. I turned 40 and I thought, there is actually going to be a time limit when I can't do this anymore. And when I kind of made those first steps, I thought I need to let Mrs. Taylor know this and let her know what an inspiration she'd been to me. So I contacted her via email, but didn't get a reply back, which I thought was a bit strange. I thought maybe she's changed her email address. So I just Googled her name. And what came up was a page during COVID times, which a few people did when they'd had funerals. And unfortunately, she died just a couple of months before I'd managed to speak to her. And she died too young, so it came as quite a shock. So I just thought I'll leave a little message there and explain what I was doing and why. And the next day, or a couple of days later, her son, Daniel, emailed me and said he remembered his mum talking about me and how, you know, how ecstatic she'd be to hear about this trip. And it was with his permission and the family's permission that I had her name, Alison, on my expedition jacket. And she became a real kind of force out there, which helped get me through some of the tough days. But why else did I go there? Lots of people ask me. It's one of the first questions, why? In fact, I've already had it asked me since I've been here today. And it's really the three parts to it. I've said, you know, it's this childhood dream. It's something that was always there that I felt I needed to do. There was my geography teacher now. She'd become quite a big part of my why and my purpose. And then my third why, which is women's health and research, that really came about after I'd started training. I'm a scientist at heart. I kind of look for the evidence, and I wanted to know, or I wanted to give myself the best chance of being successful. So I had a look and thought, how do I train for an Antarctic expedition? What nutrition needs will I need? And I looked at all the science and all the research, and all of it was based on your average white male. There was no evidence about how a female should train to do endurance expeditions. And I know that my makeup and how I train is very different to a man's. And if I'd have known what I should be doing to optimize my performance, well, it all just seemed not very fair. So I thought I'm going to highlight this, but there aren't really many women that go to the South Pole. I'm the 13th woman to ski solo and unsupported, and that's since 1994. So there's not a lot of evidence they can gain. But there was one guy called Chris Imray who I knew, and he'd done a very small study, and what he had found out was it looked like females were much better adapted to these long endurance polar activities, something to do with our body, losing less body mass and how we utilize our fat stores and things like that. So I wanted to kind of become a bit of a part of that research and kind of encourage others to take part in it as well. And another thing I found was that when you go to the South Pole, it's really important that you wear the right kit. I think I've got some of it here. Now this kit, I discovered, didn't even exist when I started training. There was not a single bit of female polar expedition kit available. It was all men's small sizes, and I thought this was a mistake. And in fact, one of my sponsors that was going to be helping, Shackleton, I did some courses through them, and I said, where's your kit for women? And they said, oh, you just have to get the men's small, and that'll do. But the problem is they kind of got away with that in mountaineering and things like that. This kind of shrink it and pink it. It was always a bit uncomfortable, but no one had made a fuss. But when it comes to polar expeditions, having the right kit isn't just about comfort. It's about, it can be outright dangerous to have things that don't fit properly. So you'd find that the trousers were kind of clinging in all the wrong places, which meant that the cold wind would impact your skin, and women were more likely to get cold injuries. The jackets would kind of be too long on the sleeves, always too long on the sleeves. You're trying to put tents up and your mittens and everything's getting in the way. So again, I kind of made a bit of a fuss about this. And Shackleton made me my own kit. And actually, by the time I left for expedition, they were the first and only company to actually have a female-only expedition kit, and they still are. The other companies still haven't kind of caught on to that. So that was another reason to kind of make a bit of a fuss, and I was using this as a reason to do it. And so where do you start when it comes to training for a South Pole expedition? I didn't know. I literally used Google again. How do I train for a polar expedition? And it came up with a name called John Fern, who was a coach that had coached the last 2 women who'd reached the South Pole. I thought, he's going to be a good start. So I contacted him, and he became my coach. And sure enough, as soon as he became my coach, I was dragging tyres across the Cornish coastline, which is where I live, and it's kind of the best playground, the best gym possible. And pulling those tyres really replicates that feeling of pulling the pulk or the sled behind you. The steeper the better. The different terrains would make it harder or easier. And that's what I started to do first. And then I signed up to just a 1-week polar training course in Norway, which is where those photos are from. I just thought I'd better kind of find out if I actually enjoyed it. I'd never skied. I'd never put expedition skis on before. I'd never camped on snow before. I thought it's all very good having these big ideas of what I want to do, but I might not be any good at it, and I might actually hate it. So I headed out to Norway. I was the only female in that team of guys that were going on doing the same course. And I knew from reading about this training course that at the end of the week, there was going to be a race. And we were going to be racing across a frozen lake. It was a few kilometers in length. And the last thing that I wanted to do was to come last. So as soon as I heard about this, I thought, I'm going to put some training in here, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I don't want anyone to know that I put all the training in and still come last. So I was down the roads, my local kind of country roads on roller skis. I was pulling tyres, and I turned up in Norway feeling quite ready for this. And it came to nearly the last day, and we had this race, and we got all lined up at the edge of this lake, had our skis on, and we absolutely said go, and I pegged it. I didn't look back. I felt I could feel everybody, right behind me. And these are all young, athletic guys. They'd like me to say that. And at the end, so you had to kind of take your skis off at the end, run up this snow slope and hit this shed, or it was a replica actually of Amundsen's hut. You had to hit that, and that was the finish line. So I raced, took my skis off, ran up, hit this shed, turned around, and they were miles away, and I was like, yes. So as if you have to take these moments, I thought, brilliant. So I thought, well, that's me done. I've proved myself. Thank you very much. But Louis Rudd, who's one of the guys who was one of our guides, he's actually the first Briton to cross Antarctica. At that evening, he said, well, maybe I think we need to redo that race and make it a bit more fair. So he suggested that we recreate the race, and this time, instead of just skiing, you're going to have to first run to your skis. Then you're going to have to put your skis on, and you're going to have to ski to your pulk. Then you have to clip in, and then you're going to have to ski the whole across the lake. And I was like, oh, well, I've won the first race, but I wasn't expecting to win this one because anyone that's kind of tried to walk on snow, it comes, if you're not on skis, it comes past your knees. So the shorter you are, the more disadvantaged you are because you've really got to kind of lift your legs to get through. So I knew I wasn't going to be the first one to get to my skis. And I wasn't. I was the last one to get to my skis. I was the last one to get to my pulk, but I was the first one to get to the end there and hit that shed and pass them all again. So anyway, that gave me this massive boost of confidence. I thought, actually, maybe I could do this. But I still not told anybody. As far as everyone else knew, I was just on a nice week-long holiday in Norway, having a bit of adventure. But Wendy was there, and she was another guide, and she was the 7th woman who'd skied solo to the South Pole, and she spotted something. She knew that it wasn't your average holiday that you went on, and she asked me what were my bigger ambitions, because she knew that there was something there. And I dared to suggest that I might want to go to the South Pole in a bit of a whisper. And she said, look, me and Louis can see that you've got potential here, and if you're willing to put the work in, we'd love to mentor you through the process. And well, that was kind of it. As soon as somebody's kind of hung that carrot, I was like, I'll only ever regret not going with this. So then I thought, well, let's just go with this. This is a great opportunity. The worst that can happen is I'm going to have some great adventures and some great photos. And so I took the next step, which was a slightly longer course out in Norway, spending more nights out on the snow, more nights in a tent, and again, just checking that I was going to enjoy it. It's all very much type 2 fun. And after I'd done that, my next kind of tick off the list was to go and learn about crevasses. So crevasses are these deep fissures in the snow or in the ice. Antarctica is known for lots of crevasses. They often don't look like this. They're normally just covered in this thin layer of snow, so you don't actually see them. So it's important that I went out and that I understood how to read the land so that I could avoid these, really. I needed to learn how to rescue people from crevassing because I was going to be doing another longer expedition in a team where there was a high chance that people were going to fall into crevasses. So I learned about that. I did learn some self-rescue techniques, how to get myself out of a crevasse, but I was told quite reassuringly that it'd be pointless because if I go into a crevasse in Antarctica and a 100-kilo pulk follows me in, I wasn't getting out anywhere. So the main thing was avoiding them. But this was it was a great trip, but it was a bit of an eye-opener as well on there. And then after all of that, I was ready to hit Greenland. This was my really big test, crossing from east to west of Greenland. Now, originally, I'd wanted to do the other trip, which went in the May. In fact, they're out there now. The May trip goes from west to east. It's meant to be slightly easier. It's slightly shorter. Greenland's never easy. It's the second largest ice cap after Antarctica, and it gets all the weather. But that May, I was planning for it. Unfortunately, I hadn't got enough money to be able to go in May, and this also happened. I managed to time having a slip disc in my neck to this point, and I actually lost all feeling down my left arm, which isn't great for a dentist, and I couldn't feel my fingers. It was unbelievably painful, and it was basically a work-based injury. It wasn't down to my training. In fact, actually, movement would help it. But I'd gone from being able to drag tyres to not even being able to jog across the road without being in pain. And I thought it might be game over. And I didn't want anybody to know about this. So apart from my coach and obviously my family, I didn't tell anybody at ALE. I didn't tell anyone by crossing of Greenland. I just concentrated on getting better and getting focused and not letting this be the end game. It would have been very easy and a very nice excuse to kind of go, oh, well, I tried, but maybe I shouldn't do it. And it took me a good couple of months. I still haven't regained full strength in my left arm, but it's a million times better than it was. But that was a real wake-up call. And crossing Greenland then, I ended up going in the August, which is the other. I actually ended up crossing the whole of Greenland, not just the ice sheet. It we were crossing in the footsteps of Fridtjof Nansen, who is like the first man to cross Greenland in 1888. So after crossing the ice cap, we then went and crossed the whole landmass too. It's actually on YouTube. This guy, Ore, was in our team. When I first met him, I thought he was going to be an idiot. I didn't actually warm to him. We had a WhatsApp meeting before we all went out there. There were 6 of us on the team. And we knew when this WhatsApp meeting was going to take place, so I was sat at home ready to meet everyone. Ore was dragging tyres through the streets of New York with his phone. I thought, we're not going to get on. But actually, I have to say, he was a really good fun, good tent mate, and he got some great footage as well. So I'm just going to show you a short clip, just to give you an idea what it was like in Greenland. You have 2 big ice falls, one at the start and one at the end of the ice cap. You have to climb these ice falls to get onto the plateau, to reach a summit, and then come down the other side. You should never cross these ice falls, we were told, in bad weather, because you need to see the crevasses. So we managed to cross, or to go up the first ice fall in good weather, but we got hit by lots of storms, which really kind of slowed our progress. We were running out of food, and we had no choice but to kind of cross the final ice fall in bad weather in whiteouts where we couldn't see, and actually we ended up running out of food. This was all a big lesson for me, and a lot of training that came from it. But the next 2 clips just give you an idea of what we were kind of battling through.
As possible, we still had to go outside from time to time.
Oh, it's crazy! There is so much wind. I just went outside by 10 meters and now I can barely see the tent. I tried to fix the tent, but it's tough.
You get the idea. Yeah, we had lots of days like that, and you don't get the luxury of kind of sitting in your tent when it's weather like that. You have to go out every hour, make sure the snow hasn't been blown off the tent, which you're using to kind of bed you in so that the tent doesn't lift up. We did sack off polar bear watch on those nights. You had to go out normally for an hour and a half. Each of you would take turns to watch out for polar bears. You weren't going to see a polar bear until it was in your face on those nights, so it really wasn't worth it. But that gave me a huge amount of confidence, and I learnt a lot on that trip. I learnt food-wise, we had enough food for 34 days, and it took us 39 days. We had to ration, and we were finishing that trip on real minimal rations. So I learned how important it is, as soon as you hit bad weather, to start preserving or saving food in case you need it later on. I learnt what food that I enjoyed, because food doesn't actually taste the same in the cold environment. So chocolate and things that I kind of enjoy here, as soon as I took it out there, it really didn't taste as great. And there's nothing worse when you've had a hard day of going to kind of tuck into some food, which was kind of a morale booster, and then finding it just was tasteless. So I learned lots of little things that really I took with me. I learned what gloves and how I was going to protect myself from the cold, because that's very much a personal choice in what you wear to protect yourself. And then it was time for me to go and do some solo training. So I've ticked off all of these things, and now I felt ready to be able to kind of look after myself out there. So I went off to Norway again for a couple of weeks. Again, I got all sorts of weather. But this training wasn't just about kind of traveling for long days. I knew now from crossing Greenland that I was able to ski for 11, 12 hours a day, every day for a long period of time. I really used Norway as a kind of way of getting my tent routine to a T. I was putting the tent up and down. I was making sure I knew where everything was. You'd be surprised how easy it is to lose everything in a tent and how frustrating it is to keep looking for everything. You put lots of stuff in your sleeping bag to keep it warm, and then you spend forever trying to find it again. So there are little tips and techniques that I kind of honed to make sure that when I went to Antarctica, I could rest as much as possible. I knew what pocket that lighter was going to be in, and as soon as I'd used that lighter, it went back in the same pocket, so I didn't have to waste energy thinking where things might be. They were always where they were supposed to be. Sadly, that doesn't happen back home. I haven't kind of kept that going. But yes, I went off to Norway, and I completed my solo trip, and then I got the big tick. They said, yes, you can go to Antarctica. There's a whole fundraising element going on in the background whilst this is happening. But the next thing I had to do was really make sure my kit was right. I said about how there was nothing that kind of fitted a female. Well, the same went with everything. So the face masks in particular, they were all a standard shape for your average male face, and I put them on, and the nose was down here and the mouth was down here. So I got a really talented sister-in-law who got the scissors out and needle and thread, and she basically adapted all of my kit that I was wearing so that it fit my face as best as it could. I added big tags onto everything. Again, you don't want to be looking for a zip when you're out there. If you need the loo, you just want to be able to grab the zip or attach cord onto everything to make life easier for you. It doesn't take you long to be frustrated at little things, and you've got a lot of time to think when you're on expedition, so you're thinking of how I can make things easier for myself. That was one thing I did. And then I was off to Punta Arenas. So Punta Arenas is in Patagonia. It's like the southern tip of Chile, and it's the stop-off point before you go on to Antarctica. And I spent about 6 days here, and I could have done with 7. This is where Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions have their base. So you go there and you have lots of meetings. They check your kit, and I actually shipped out my pulk or my sled to Antarctica. I was going to take it as luggage, but then I was hearing all these horror stories of everyone having all their food confiscated because you could only have 800 grams of chocolate. I thought, well, that's not going to happen. So inside that pulk is a lot of chocolate that I smuggled in, nuts, all my goodies, and sure enough, I didn't get anything confiscated, so that's the way to do it. Whereas lots of other people did. There was no way I was eating South American chocolate on my expedition. And in Punta Arenas, yeah, as I said, they're really strict on making sure that you're prepared. You had to have a whole kit list with weights, everything. They needed to know what you were taking with you. You had to have 2 of everything, pretty much. So they say 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So if you've only got 1 of something and that breaks, then you're going to end up needing to be rescued. So I had 2 satellite phones, 2 GPS, 2 compasses, spare bindings, 2 stoves. It makes your pulk weight go up quite quickly. And I then had to kind of prep all my kits. There's little tips and things I do to make it easier to put a tent up, taping the poles beforehand. We had flight briefings, and this little video just gives you a quick idea, a quick roundup.
So I'm back at Ailey this morning. Today we are going through comms, the route that we're going to take, and we're going to see the doctor and check our med kit.
I also realised it's going to be 53 days before I went to the bar, so I had to pop a visit in there too. You probably saw there that I divided all my food up and kind of vacuum sealed everything. I actually saved over 1 kilo in weight just by kind of changing it from one packaging to another and vacuum packing it. I'd actually pack everything into 5-day bags, so every 5 days I'd have a new set of food, and that would have all my snacks, all my food in there. And it meant that in my mind, I could just cut down this journey into every 5-day expeditions. I'd only ever think about those 5 days. I wouldn't think about all the bags that I had to get through. And at the end of 5 days, the idea was to have a little treat kind of as a kind of marking point. And it just helped to break the journey up. Also, I think you might have seen, But yeah, so there's all my food divvied up. I was actually taking 5,500 calories worth of food a day, which wasn't enough. I knew it was going to take, I'd be sort of using between 7,000 to 7,500 calories, but actually being able to pull all of that in weight wasn't feasible. I'd end up using more calories to pull it. So the idea is try and find high-calorie food that doesn't weigh too much, and that takes a lot of training. There's a lot of eating, and this is going to show you some of what I've kind of worked out for myself was going to be better
It's
for me.
another day of food prep. Finally, I think I'm at the end of my food prep. So what have we got? So each one of these represents 5 days worth of food. Now, I can eat a pack of these in one sitting. Pack of 5. So having one of these every, what is it? Oh my gosh, it's an every 10-day Freddo. That is going to be a real treat for me. And every day, once I put my tent up, first thing I'll have, ginger nut biscuit and a cuppa. Now these are obviously just my snacks for during the day. I've still got my breakfast that I've made up, my dinners, a recovery drink, butter, cheese. So it's a lot of calories, and I'm actually increasing the calorie count slightly towards the end when I'm going to need it the most. Yeah, no more cooking till January.
So I had like a block of cheese and a block of butter every 5 days. This was like the best. And I put on weight before going out there as well, which was important. So this was the best part of my training. I had no problem enjoying this. But yeah, it's a lot of thinking, and as a dentist, you want to cry looking at all of that, because every hour and 20 minutes or every hour and a half, I was eating high sugar diet, which as a dentist, you're told not to snack on food. So there's a lot of preparation had gone in before going to make sure my teeth weren't going to give me some trouble. And I had to have a wisdom tooth taken out just in case before I left. I was taking it very seriously. And then all the rest of the final bits of kit prep here. So making sure there's no holes in my kit, the sleeping bag system's working, tying rope to my tent. I did not want to lose my tent. So it's very easy in wind when you're putting a tent up by yourself for it to get caught in the wind and disappear. So I had rope and a carabiner. It was always either clipped to my pulk or it was clipped to me so that I wouldn't lose it. You're told all these stories before you go there about people that got it wrong. And I didn't want to be one of those legends. And there was one person who, within the first week, they lost one of their mittens because they hadn't got it tied around any elastic tied to their wrists. And you think, losing a mitten, that's not a problem. I'm sure they've got a spare one. They had no spare. They actually had to be rescued because they'd not held onto their mitten and were going to risk frostbite. And then there was another lady, another girl, Molly. She arrived at the South Pole. She arrived at the start point. She had her skis on, and for some reason she wasn't thinking. She took her skis off to go and get something from her sled before she set off, and she went straight into a crevasse. She'd not even gone anywhere. The plane was still just over the horizon. Luckily, she had her satellite phone on her, and was able, because she wasn't tied to her pulk, that hadn't gone in with her. She'd gone a short distance down, but she couldn't get herself out. And that plane just did a big loop. It landed again, lifted her out, and she started again, but very embarrassed, and we all know about it. And I didn't want to be one of those people, so I was very aware not to make any silly mistakes. Before you go out to Antarctica, every couple of years, they actually do a radar scan of the area where the expeditions go, and they show you a map of where the worst crevassing is, which is how you kind of plan your route, and you just put waypoints that you're going to aim towards. You can't avoid the crevasses, but you can avoid the worst of them, and you can also see which direction they get worse, so that when you do come across crevasses, you know to go to your right rather than to your left, and things like that. So there's lots of little things that you just need to be really tuned into. And then finally, I got the okay, and we went off and landed in Antarctica. So I'm going to have a quick, literally 5-10 minute comfort break for anyone that's cups of tea have gone through them. But if you can be back here by 1:45, that would be brilliant. This is your 2-minute warning, 2-minute warning. It ages you, yeah. Okay, are we ready for round 2? I'm gonna. All good to go? Real. Right, I'm going to get started again then. We're on the way. We're on Antarctica, and the first stage of getting to the South Pole is actually landing on Antarctica. This was a real bucket list moment for me. I'd read all about this blue ice runway. The Antarctica season runs from November to January. It's actually, after January, they pack everything up, they disappear, and it's like no one had been there. And they only leave a very small little, what's it called? Kind of a little compartment or metal compartment that they bury under the ice, and that's just for the very first people that land the following November to then set up camp again. And this blue ice runway, the ice on it is 80,000 years old, and they create it every year, which kind of blew my mind. I'm going to show you a video of this plane landing. This was actually when I left Antarctica. When we arrived, it was blue skies, it was beautiful, but it shows you how, well, health and safety kind of disappeared once we'd finished our expedition, or once I'd finished my expedition. There was nothing stopping me running underneath this plane, but it shows you how it lands. In a plane that lands on ice, you can't just press the brakes, otherwise it's going to skid off. They actually use reverse thrust to stop the plane. So you'll see the snow kind of kicking up at the end. And you couldn't wipe the smile from my face on that one, because it really was a moment that I'd been dreaming of for a long time. And this is where we landed, Union Glacier. Union Glacier is basically a base camp. That's exactly what it looks like there. You've got some very nice posh tents to the right. Those tents were basically for people, anyone that's paid lots of money to go and look at some penguins. I didn't get to stay in those. They got 2 beds. I actually got to stay in one on when I returned after finishing my expedition. I got an upgrade. The other tents, the smaller tents in the background, they're all the staff members, and it's a real buzzing community out there. The people that work there work for the whole 3 months. You've got people that are doing comms out there, people that are coordinating the expeditions. You've got cleaners, just like the hotel. You've got chefs. It's a great mix of people and a really fun place to work. Where I was camped, I don't know if you can see those little red tents sort of in the middle towards the back near the mountains. We had to set up our own tents and stay there until we were ready to go out on expedition. We were basically waiting for a good weather window so that they could fly us to our start points. You didn't get much warning when that was going to be. You had, again, lots of meetings. I was expecting to be there for a few days just to kind of get myself ready, to kind of acclimatise a little bit. We ended up leaving a lot sooner than planned, because we got a weather window that said if you don't leave in the next hour or hour and a half, then you'll have to wait for nearly a week before you'll get the next weather window. So it was tents down, go, 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 hope I've got everything. It was basically that. So that quick bit of panic, or kind of jetting off to my first location. And the first location was only, or my start point was only a 20-minute short flight. Well, I thought I'll just pop in here about toilets, because everyone loves to talk about toilets. These were the luxury toilets at base camp, and they look pretty nice, don't they? You get 2 toilets per cubicle, and if you're wondering why, it's basically you cannot mix solid and waste. Everything gets shipped off, nothing gets left there, even when they have a shower at Union Glacier. The shower, you're only allowed, if you work there, you're only allowed 2 a week. for 90 seconds at a time. It's basically a bucket of water. Once that runs out, that's it, because they filter out the grey water and they ship that off back to Chile. It doesn't go into the ground there either. But you became a dab hand at being able to kind of dance between the two toilets. Don't get it wrong. One of them's got a nice sieve there, just in case you did get things wrong. There you go. It was actually quite nice to be on expedition and not to have to worry about this in the morning. And those toilet seats, you can imagine how cold they were to sit on. So it was a relief almost to be at this point. This was the Twin Otter flight that I took to Hercules Inlet. Now, the reason I was doing this route, people say, why didn't you do a different route? And this is the traditional route. This is the one that if you're going to break any records with, you would do. This was the route that the first woman to ski solo and unsupported the South Pole back in 1994, Liv Arneson. This was the route she took. So this is kind of the traditional one. There are shorter routes and different routes that other expeditioners were going out to do. There was a point here where reality kind of hit. Up until this point, I was very excited. There's lots going on, lots to think about, and you're getting yourself ready for this moment. This was the moment when that plane took off and left me there that I really realised I was going to be all on my own for the next 53 days, or what I thought was going to be 50 days, and turned into 53 days. I actually filmed the plane leaving, and you can kind of see behind my smile that reality dawning on me. Yikes, that's a grimace, not a smile. Yeah, that reality hit then. And so what was my routine? This was basically all I did for 53 days. Eat, ski, sleep, repeat. Mixed in with that was eat, and keep on eating. Actually, every hour and a half, I broke it down and I had different snacks depending on which time of day it was. It helped me know what time of day it was. I mean, I'd look forward to something a bit different. It might be nuts and Pringles one beat, it might be chocolate the next. And that really helped to break down my day, and I'd be looking forward, that's all I'd be looking forward to during that hour and a half is my next fuel stop. But in reality, this was actually my routine. A lot of time is spent melting the ice and melting the snow to make water. I was carrying all my water with me. Each morning I'd melt it, and then again at night time for my cooking as well. It's really important to stay hydrated when you're on expedition. It's a desert, you know, it's the driest place on Earth, Antarctica, and you don't realise that because you're surrounded by ice. It's quite hard to believe. But I always start the day by drinking a whole litre of water with a vitamin tablet in, and then I just top that up during the day. Every time I had a break, I'd top up that so that I could stay hydrated. It did mean I needed about 3 or 4 loo visits before I'd even left camp, which is slightly frustrating, but it did the job and it kept me going. I checked the weather, so I had a little GPS or an InReach mini tracking device that had a weather app on it, and the main thing I was looking for was what was the wind speed doing and what was the wind direction. Wind will make your day very different. If you've got low wind speeds, you know that you're going to feel quite warm, relatively speaking, that day, and you need to know whether you're going to be able to keep skiing for the whole day or whether you need to set up camp sooner. The wind direction is really important. At the end of the day, I needed to know how I was going to orientate my tent so that it was going to be safe and not get damaged. That was a key thing to do. And then I had to ski for about 11 hours, sometimes 12 hours, occasionally 13 hours when needing to, before setting up camp every evening. I'd change it into my happy socks, and I always put that on there because it was such a key moment in my day. It was genuinely when I'd have a big smile on my face because taking off my socks that didn't necessarily get, they got changed once in 53 days, but that was it. No, nothing else got changed in 53 days. So actually taking those socks off and putting some nice, warm, cozy socks on would always make me smile. And I'd take my expedition jacket off, but I'd keep my kind of base layers on to keep warm. I then melt snow, as I said, and every night I had to give comms team a call and give them my coordinates so that they could track me on a map and knew where I was. They wanted to know what my coordinates were, how long I'd been skiing for, so that if they hadn't heard from me, they could kind of calculate roughly where I might be. There are certain areas in Antarctica where it's impossible to be rescued. The actual terrain is too dangerous for a plane to land. So they're listening to what my voice sounds like. Am I pretending to be okay, or is there something underlying going on that they need to be aware of before I enter one of these areas where they're not going to be able to rescue me? And it's really interesting. They actually have a little report of you, and they don't normally let you see it, but they said mine was okay, so I was all right to look at it. And you think that you're kind of hiding how you're feeling, or you're putting on a brave face and trying to sound positive, and then you read the report and it says, pretending to be positive. And they know exactly what they're listening for, you know, they're a dab hand at it. But it's really interesting, really good to do. In fact, the previous year, someone that I knew that was doing this expedition, they got rescued because mentally they couldn't cope with it all. I'd also charge my kits. People ask me, how do you charge your kit when you've not got a plug socket? I had 2 solar panels. That the benefit of Antarctica is 24-hour daylight, which was brilliant. All my other expeditions, I'd really struggled to charge my kit, especially in Greenland in that bad weather, because you had to do it during the day. You had to attach it to your sled and it'd get damaged with the weather and the movement. But in Antarctica, this was one of the easiest things to do. You actually put the solar panels in between the inner and the outer tent overnight, and you'd usually get enough daylight there to keep everything, or keep your battery packs charged. See, in poor weather, it didn't charge so well, but I always had enough battery packs to kind of keep things going so that I wouldn't lose charge of anything. Because if I didn't charge my satellite phone, then they were going to come and rescue me. They were very strict. 8:10 was my call time, and if I missed that, then I was in trouble. They would allow me one more chance to call them, and if I missed that, then they were looking at how they were going to be getting ready to get a plane to come and rescue me. And if that plane came out, I had no choice but to get on it. There's no good telling them that I forgot to charge my phone or I couldn't turn it on. They weren't listening to it. You had to get on that plane and you had to leave. So they were really strict on that. And there was one day, I don't know if any of you followed me, when they couldn't hear me and I couldn't leave a voice message that day. And I could hear them on the other end of the phone, but they couldn't hear me. I thought, this is strange. And they said, you know, as a once only, they were going to let me leave a little, what we call an in-reach satellite message, but they wanted to hear my voice. So I needed to make sure my second phone was ready to go the next day. And if that didn't happen, then they were coming to get me. There was slight panic. I thought, this is quite early on, what's happened? And then I thought back and I thought, hang on a minute. Just before that call, I was in a little bit of a rush. And I thought, oh, I think I can get my hot chocolate done before I give them a ring. It was a new day. It was the start of a new 5 days, so I had a new pack of hot chocolate. I was in a bit of a rush. I opened the pack, and all the hot chocolate just went whoosh, like this, and it landed on everything, so I was just dusting it off. And I thought, well, maybe it was hot chocolate or something had landed in this phone. Sure enough, gave it a blow. The next day worked fine. I never told them it was just my impatience at getting my hot chocolate before my talk that caused it. What else did I do? Video diaries. I think quite a few of you listened to some of those video diaries. Honestly, there was sometimes a bit of a chore. Sometimes I nearly forgot, because to me, I felt like I'd not really done anything different. You feel like no one's really listening anyway, so you kind of don't think about it. It's only now, looking back, that it's quite interesting to listen back and realise what was different every day. And thankfully, I didn't overshare, which was another thing I was worried about doing before I left. Most importantly is getting sleep. Sleep is underrated on expeditions. If you don't sleep, your body doesn't recover, and your body can only keep going for so long before it wants to give up on you. So it was really drilled into me during training that I needed to make sure I got enough sleep and enough recovery. And this was pretty much what a lot of my expedition was like. That's actually a photo that I took. I'm very aware that people kind of think of Antarctica, and all you see are these nice pictures of blue skies and the icy wilderness, and it does look beautiful, and lots of days were like that. But the reason you don't see any of the other photos is because this is what it looks like. That was a photo I took the day that I was really going to go for it and get up my distance. So I had a plan before I went out there. I'd watched other people's expeditions, I'd seen what worked, and basically I knew that I needed to start off slowly. I needed to gradually build up the number of hours I was on skis so that my body adjusted. So I told everyone not to panic back home, but I said I'm going to go really slowly for these days, and then on this day, I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to really get my distances and up the distance, and the expedition's really going to start. This was the day that I was going to up my distance and go for it, and I opened the tent, and I was like, oh. I thought, nope, this is just how it happens. I then got onto my skis, and I went to do my first bit of skiing, and I disappeared into the snow. And the snow got so deep it was nearly up to my knees, which is really unusual in Antarctica because Antarctica is a desert. It doesn't snow. Actually, the snow that you do get tends to be just kind of the wind picking up and moving it around the continent. But that year, they'd had a freak weather event, which they say might happen once every 8 years or so, and it just decided to happen for me. And there'd been this snow dump, but the difficulty was that nobody could tell me when it was going to end. So I thought maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days. Nobody knew when it was going to finish, and the only reassurance I could get was from the comms team saying everybody's suffering. Anyone that's on an expedition is getting the same deal. But it meant I was doing distances that were less than half than I expected. And every day that it continued was every day it was chipping away at that morale and me thinking, I might not do this. If this carries on or if there's another snow dump further on, then it's impossible for me to finish. I'd learned that when bad weather hits, the first thing I need to do is conserve food, start rationing. So straight away I started to ration my food to give myself the best chance of success. Along with rationing food, I had to be careful with my fuel as well. I was carrying fuel to melt the ice and snow. So it was a tough start and it went on for days. I think it was about 6 or 7 days before the conditions actually improved. But we never actually got those amazing icy conditions that I dreamed of where my pulk would skate over the ice. Those just didn't happen. It was very much all uphill, all hard work, and all my training really went into every day that I was out there. This also happened a lot. I knew it would. So my pulk would tip. First thing you'd know about it is that you just suddenly this dead weight that you're trying to pull along and you turn around, you roll your eyes, because the one thing you don't want to do when you're going on a 708-mile expedition is to have to ski backwards. And every time this would happen, you'd be going backwards and forwards, and all of those, that's burning energy, it's more steps than you want to take. And then you're going to have to haul this 100-kilo pulk back over, only for 100 yards down for it to happen again. It was easier later on because you could move the weight around the pulk, but at this point, it was heavy everywhere. And there was one day when this happened, and I tipped the pulk back up, and there was a wet patch on the back of it, and I panicked because I knew that that was my fuel. And that's a horror story that you don't want. You don't want to lose any fuel, especially if you're already rationing it because you don't think you're going to finish. So I couldn't work out where it was leaking from, but I had a spare container because I was about halfway through the expedition. So I was able to kind of turn my back to the wind, and it was really powering wind behind me, and kind of decant it into another container. But from that moment on, I knew that I was going to have to sacrifice hot meals to make sure that I could carry on. So for most of my expedition, I didn't have any hot dinners. Normally, you would kind of fill a Nalgene bottle, like a water bottle, and in the evening, and you'd put that in your sleeping bag, and that could be a nice, like, hot water bottle. I didn't do that. I wanted to make sure that if I wasn't going to make it, that I'd tried everything, and I'd never have those what if, or if only I'd done this, or if only I'd done that. I wanted to know that I'd done everything I could to be successful. And this happened. I also then would look around and think, well, you've got to really try and keep a sense of humour. So even though it happened a lot, I just think, what could I do with that? I know what I'll do. I'll take a photo and I'll get some Instagram story out of it in the end. So that's pretty much what I did. And I celebrated my birthday out there. It wasn't long into my expedition that I had my birthday. I had birthday, Christmas and New Year. And beforehand, I thought, I've got to celebrate this. When am I ever going to be on Antarctica on my birthday? So I bought a candle, and this candle was one of those jazzy ones that kind of do these amazing flames. You pull the thing out and it'll sing happy birthday to you. I thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to film this. So I set to film it. I went to light it. It's actually quite a windy day that day. It was very cold, and it wouldn't light. So I thought, oh, it's okay. I'll put my foil protector over it. Still wouldn't light. Went to pull the tag out so it would sing happy birthday. Didn't do anything. I was like, well, this is a bit of a it was quite depressing. Not to worry, I still got a birthday cake. I'll get my birthday cake out and enjoy it. Flat as a pancake. So I kind of was looking at myself, half laughing at the effort I'd put in and how none of it had really paid off. I still had one trick in the bag to kind of lift my spirits.
Well, happy birthday to me. What have we got? Drink of choice, Tommy's margarita. Just add ice. So the first time using my multi-tool today, and I am using it to cut my lime for my cocktail. Happy birthday to me. Cheers.
So before that, before I left, I got all my friends and family to kind of choose a drink of choice and to just do a very short video to say cheers. And on that evening, I flicked through every single video for that, and I cheersed every single person and had that drink. And that did lift my spirits, literally. That multi-tool that I had to be able to fix anything that went wrong. So I needed to learn how to take a stove apart, put it back together. If my ski bindings went, I needed to know how to put a new set on and take those off. The only thing I used that multi-tool for the whole of my expedition was cutting up my limes for my cocktails, which I was quite pleased about. That candle, by the way, another story for that. So I threw that in the bin. You know how I said I had a bag for every 5 days worth of food? Well, once I'd finished that food, that bag would become a rubbish bag for the next 5 days, and I'd do it that way. It was a few days after my birthday when I was setting up my tent and I was getting ready for my comms call, and I could hear this electrical kind of screeching sound. I thought, what on earth is this? It's got to be some of my kit. So I was listening to everything that was electrical, my solar panels. I took everything apart, took the batteries out of anything, couldn't find out what it was. In the end, I thought, am I actually hearing things? Could this be it? I've spent too much time on my own. And I almost accepted that and thought, just deal with it. You're still fine. You're just hearing things. And it wasn't until, it must have been about 10 days or so after my birthday when that rubbish bag got put into my sled. And I was having a snack one day and you pull your sled towards you to get your food out. And I just heard, happy birthday to you. And it started singing and my candle had kicked in and I had that for the whole, that kept going for the whole of my expedition. There's good battery power on that. Luckily I had earphones that I could kind of block it out. But part of me was relieved that at least I found out what it was. So yes, Christmas, had Christmas out there. There's my Christmas tree. Christmas was pretty much like any other day for me, apart from the fact that I actually forked out a bit of money and used my satellite phone for the only time to call my mum and dad. For the whole expedition, I didn't want to speak to anybody, and it's very, very expensive to use a satellite phone. And I really wanted that experience of isolation and being on my own. However, I thought it was worth a call to mum and dad, but I knew that that could also get quite emotional and might, not be the best thing. But it was definitely a highlight of my morning, doing that before I set off. At this point, I was obviously chasing time. I was still very much behind where I needed to be, so the pressure was on. So I recognised it was Christmas. I recognised where I was and was grateful for where I was. And then I just carried on with my routine for the rest of the day and had my Christmas cocktail that night. So I'm talking about lots of challenges, what challenges there were. There was obviously the crevassing, the deep snow we've talked about, having to ration my food. Naturally, it's cold, it's windy, and that goes without saying. I had that isolation. I also had some injuries. I did actually take this slide out because it's a bit gruesome. Polar thigh, it's a condition, it's a wind injury basically that mainly affects women. It's down to how sort of the fat's deposited and also the clothing. It will tend to affect women, but it can end your expedition if you don't treat it and catch it early. And you don't notice it when it's at its early stages. So I knew about this. I got it very slightly when I was in Greenland at the end of my expedition. It's a combination of cold and also abrasion. And very early on, I got the shock when I found the early starts of polar thigh on me. And every day it seemed to get more and more. And I was like, this is going to be a game changer. I knew of someone that had to be rescued because of it. It caused very nasty injuries. So I had lots of dressings and things to treat it, and I treated it straight away. And thankfully, I did that. And then I wore extra clothing over the top of my salopettes as well. And I managed to keep it at bay. But anyone wanting to see the pictures, can just let me know. They are on here, but they're way down the list. It was a bit gruesome. We said about the fuel spill. I had issues with some equipment, my GPS, things like that. Everything that was keeping me on my toes and really making me work hard. And I knew now that I was having to go faster than I was planning to do or do distances longer than I was planning to do. But I had to be very careful not to overdo it, really being aware not, to prevent exhaustion. But the way I got through it was always remembering that why, those 3 reasons why I was doing it. I'd also visualised that feeling of getting to the South Pole. Even before I went there. I'd imagine what it would feel like, and those butterflies would be there. And I'd do that during the day. Most days, actually, I'd imagine that feeling, and it would actually make me feel almost, I'd have to stop myself because it would give me goosebumps in an already cold environment. It's not ideal. But when we talk about sastrugi are basically waves of ice. They vary in height. Some of them are just ankle height. If you imagine the sea and those waves, it's like that, but they're solid ice. And sastrugi was there for the whole of my expedition. It was a constant battle, and it's something that everyone says you need to keep a sense of humour about. But there were certain sections that I knew were going to be the most difficult, and this was one area. It was a 120-kilometre stretch where the sastrugi is much taller than myself. It looks absolutely beautiful when you can see it. It's like, I said, it's like kind of going around Yorkshire Sculpture Park, something like that. It's really incredible what nature can create. But when you've got a day when you can't see where you're going and it's complete whiteout, the first thing you know about it is when your ski literally goes up at 90 degrees, or you're tottering and you realise that your ski poles aren't reaching the ground, and you're imagining whereabouts you are on one of these things, and being very aware that you can't break an ankle, twist an ankle, because no one's coming to get you, and you can't break a ski. But these were, although it was beautiful, I was very much respectful of this environment and very keen to get through it as quickly as possible when I had the good weather. Talking about difficult days, this was my most difficult day, or the one on the right. That's actually a screenshot of my video diary for the day. And that was the day where I was at the halfway point in terms of time for my expedition, but I was a long way off the halfway point of the actual expedition. And I just had a phone call with the comms team, and they'd suggested that maybe I should be thinking about getting a food resupply because they'd done the maths and they didn't think I was going to make it. And I said, well, I've got enough food, I've rationed for this amount of days. And they said, yes, we know that, but even with that food rationing, you're about 4 days out. You need to think about getting this food resupply. And there's a place at the halfway point where there's a skiway that I cross. You wouldn't know it's a skiway, you can't see it. But literally planes would come into land to refuel if they were going on to other places in Antarctica. So it meant a plane would regularly at some point be landing on this skiway, and if I needed food, it would be an easy place for them to be able to drop this food, and it wouldn't cost me anything to do that. However, that was only the halfway point, and it really felt too soon for me to be able to kind of make that call and decide what to do. This was the point when I just wanted someone to tell me what to do, and I realised I had no one that I could kind of talk to, and I had to make that decision myself. So although they can advise you, they won't tell you, and you have to make that choice yourself. If I decided not to go for the food resupply, but then I ended up needing it later on, it was going to cost me anywhere between £11,000 and £19,000 to charter the flight that would drop the food for me. I didn't have that money. And I was thinking of the conversations I might have to somehow get people to have with my sponsors to see about getting that money. It was a real kind of barrier it was a real, well, this is what happened, I cried. It didn't last long. And I thought, life's not fair. I've not been given a good chance here. This was never meant to happen. But then I thought, there is still a chance. I did my maths. I'm not very good at maths. I just don't enjoy maths. But maybe that was a good thing, because it meant I thought I might have a chance. And I decided that I was just going to go for it. I was going to give it my all, and I was going to make the sacrifices I needed to make to get there. But once I'd made that decision, I didn't dwell on it. That was it then. I cleared my mind, and I focused on the next day and doing my best the next day. There was no point in wondering, what if, because I couldn't change it now. I told them I didn't want a resupply, and I just had to go for it. And I'm just going to play you a short video just to show you one of the hard days, and then we will get to some good days, I promise. But it wasn't easy out there.
Video diary, day 46, and it's cold. Got all the clothes on today. Today was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Whiteout all day, like not just flat light, like complete whiteout. Couldn't see a thing. Even looking just down at the ground, like if it's pretty much a whiteout, you can. If you look straight down at your skis, you can usually just see kind of like the ups and downs slightly of the ground, but couldn't even see that. So it was awful because there was lots of sastrugi like crazy kind of sastrugi stuff, which was just knocking me off balance and just couldn't get any rhythm or distance. Fell over once. Surprised it wasn't more. Pulp kept tipping because you couldn't see that just next to you was, you know, a bit of sastrugi that was going to knock it off balance. So I kept having to go back and tip the pulp back again. And then about 3 o'clock, it all went quiet, all flat. Not flat, but there wasn't any sastrugi, and I thought, yes, I'm through it, this is it. And about an hour later, it's back again. Oh, for God's sake. So 22 kilometres, which I shouldn't really grumble at because that's good considering, but I wanted more. Set my tent up, couldn't see where I was setting up, so, well, it's meant to be white out again tomorrow, so I'm not even going to be able to see how it looks. Anyway, bit of a rubbish day, but at least it's one step closer to being at the end, nearly at the pole.
You know what, I honestly thought I was being really positive in all my messages. And then I look back and go, that was not positive in the slightest. But there were lots of days like that, and I found those video diaries actually really useful, not just to kind of a report of what I've done, but it would be a way, all of this was going on in my head. I've not spoken to anybody. So giving these or doing these video messages, it kind of was a way of me processing the day, going through it, putting it out there, dealing with it, drawing a line under it, and then moving on to the next day rather than just having it all kind of inside my head. So they proved to be more useful than I realised. And then this is a quote from Shackleton. Shackleton's got some great quotes. I usually use them quite a lot in any talks that I do, but this is one of my favourites. It says, "The quality I look for most is optimism, especially optimism in the face of reverses and apparent defeat. Optimism is true moral courage." And I like to think that I'm generally an optimistic person. I was keen to make sure I enjoyed this expedition. This was a very personal journey. It wasn't a plan to kind of be the best, be the first. There was a big reason for doing this. I didn't want to get so fixated on the South Pole that I didn't actually enjoy the experience. I didn't think I was ever going to get to go there again. So how did I deal with these difficult moments? I tried to have fun. I had lots of video messages from people back home, and I actually watched those over and over again. I thought I'd maybe, you know, it might be quite nice to pass the time some evenings looking at them, but actually I really relied on those, and it reminded me of all the support that I had back home, and my kind of cheerleaders back home that were kind of following this, and that gave me a boost to keep going, especially there was one person, well, anyone who had children that sent me a message. You were the ones, like the kids there saying, I think there was a 6-year-old especially going, "Come on, Kat, you can't give up now, not after all the work you've put in." And I looked and I listened to that again and again. I'm like, I can't let this kid down. I'll keep going. So yeah, that really worked well. I also found my own way of making friends out there. I maintained a sense of humour. I'm very much, I like the saying, you don't have to be serious to take things seriously. Is that the right word? Yeah, you don't have to be serious to take things seriously. People would often mistake me for not taking things seriously because I was having a laugh. But I took things very seriously. Like you could see from the beginning when I took on that race across the lake, it may have looked like I was one of those, well, I was one of those people that pretends not to revise but has actually revised and done well. I take things very seriously, but I like to enjoy myself too. I'm going to show you a short video of a friend I made out there called Steve. Steve was my shovel, and Steve's got a bit of a story behind him because he was named Steve after my boss, my old boss at work. My old boss had a big dream. He wanted to go to Antarctica. He actually wanted to go to Greenland, and he had the expedition all planned out, and they got there, but the weather stopped them even starting their expedition, so he never got to go. So I asked him if I could borrow his shovel to take with me on my expedition, and he said, "Of course you can, just so long as you get a photo of him at the South Pole." Some of you might have seen this before. It's my own version of Wilson from Castaway on the film, if you've seen that, but I'll remind anyone that's not seen it. Did you just hear somebody at the door? Steve, what are you doing there? You're meant to be looking after the pole. You're cold. You're thirsty. You're lonely. Oh, Steve.
Do you want a cup of tea? Come on then. This is Steve the shovel. You're a bit less lonely now, Steve. Don't get too comfortable, Steve. You're going back outside in a minute. Right, Steve.
There he is at the South Pole. That was another moment when I watched that back when I got home and then questioned whether I had gone a little bit crazy out there. But yeah, very much having fun. Actually, you had to, like I said at the beginning, you had to give a list of absolutely everything you were taking on this expedition to Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions. I did, but I kind of missed out the googly eyes and the margaritas there. I thought, I'm not going to admit to this unless I get to the South Pole, because I don't want them telling everyone that the reason she didn't get there was because she saved all this weight by, saving the packaging and then sacrificed it and put alcohol and googly eyes in there instead. But you can have fun. And there were good days, and there really were some absolutely amazing days. Antarctica, the sun there is incredible, the light is incredible. This was actually on my birthday, and it's called a parhelion, or a sundog, where you get these halos around the sun. And the best one that I saw was actually on my final day when I reached the South Pole, and there were 3 rainbows around the sun, and I thought, this is incredible. Better get a photo of that. Quickly whisked out my phone to get a photo, died. It got very, very cold. Everything died, all of my equipment, when I got to the South Pole. So unfortunately, I didn't get that, but I made sure that I stood there and I remembered it. There was also the snow changes. No day, no kilometre was the same as the rest. You really focus in on what's around you. And people say, how did you cope looking at this vast expanse of white and nothingness? To me, it wasn't nothingness. I noticed every change and the texture of the snow. There were days when it was like sugar. And when the wind would lift that up, it was like sparkling diamonds just whisking in front of your eyes. And it was breathtaking. And these are the moments that I allowed myself to stop and not worry about the speed on that time, because I was really taking all of this in, and it gets quite emotional to think about it as well at times. It's one of those days. Then I got to the pole. So the South Pole is at around 3,000 metres. It actually feels higher than that because the way the Earth spins on its axis, I'm going to get this very wrong, means that the atmosphere kind of bulges at the equator and compresses at the pole. So it actually feels, the atmospheric pressure, it feels much higher than 3,000 metres. So you can't breathe as well as you get higher up. I was told by someone or one of my mentors before I got to the South Pole, or before I started this expedition, to really let the expedition come to you. I know exactly what he meant. There was a certain day when suddenly everything seemed to be going my way. It was always a battle, but it felt like I was being consistent. I was getting the distances that I need to. There was never a day when I could relax about it. I really felt that the expedition had come to me, and I remembered the times when it had been really tough at the beginning. And it honestly felt like Antarctica was testing me to make sure that I was kind of worthy of getting through there.
Evening all. Well, this was officially day 1 of my expedition. Day 10. How did that happen? Good evening from Antarctica on day 27. Happy Christmas from Antarctica. Hello from Antarctica on Boxing Day. Actually one of my favourite days. Happy New Year's Day. Well, on the evening of my 44th birthday, I am calling you live from the ice bar, which has opened in my honour this evening. I'm currently enjoying one of my treats that I've brought with me, which is a margarita with Antarctic ice. Day 42. And, oh, it was a tough one today. Yes, I have made it, and it feels absolutely incredible. all the way along. Mrs. Taylor, Mrs. T, Alison, you were definitely with me. And I hope you enjoyed the journey, and you certainly helped get me out of some difficult moments. Who'd have thought that lesson all those years ago would have led to this?
I think that video shows just how windy it was when I got there. It was about -44, I think it said, when I got there. That photo, the pain taking my mask down for literally for a second to get that picture because it hurt so much. Everything ices up. So inside my mask was completely iced up when you're breathing. And normally it kind of sits away from your face, but because of the wind, it was kind of pounding into my face and the ice was sticking to my cheeks, causing damage there. But when I got to the pole, suddenly all those moments that I was imagining what it would be like, it was happening. I didn't really know what to do in a way, but it was emotional. The good thing about having sort of ski goggles in is you can't see the tears, and I certainly wasn't lifting those up because those would freeze in seconds as well. But I was thinking, I wasn't just thinking about the journey that I'd just been on then, I was really thinking about the whole 3 years that it had taken me to get there, and just allowing myself to kind of feel proud and to let it sink in. It's very easy, I think, to tick something off and say I've done that and move on. I was very keen to actually stay in that moment for as long as I could.
Oh, sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah. I get a feeling that I never had before. No, I get a good feeling, yeah.
And that's it, guys. I just want to quickly just say a couple of things about the charities that I've been raising money for. Because it takes such a long time to raise money to actually go on the expedition, I didn't really get the chance to really plug my charities as much as I'd like to. So I'm using this next year to really try and raise the funds that I can do for them. It's Bridge to Aid and Community Action Nepal. Community Action Nepal was actually a charity that was set up by Doug Scott, the first Briton to climb Everest. I met him way back in 2003, I think. And I'd just come back from doing some work out in Nepal. And I'd seen him at an outdoor exhibition, and he was saying that they're having real trouble in the communities where they're setting up these medical camps with dental problems and not having any access to any dental care. And a lot of the trekkers that come through these communities in Nepal, they all bring sweets for the children, and these children have got terrible teeth and no access to dental care there. So I said that if I ever got the opportunity, then I would do to raise some money to help them set up the dental clinics out there. And Bridge to Aid, they really work with a community in Tanzania to train the local medical people there to be able to set up and kind of create a sustainable clinic to access dental care there. It's a real problem that's often overlooked. So I'm keen to kind of raise as much money for these charities as possible and to hopefully go out and see where that money gets spent next year. So thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you. So we've got about 20-25 minutes of time of some questions that Cole will look after. I will run around with a handheld mic. And the questions that you've had bubbling away, Cole, take it away.
Thanks. That was fantastic. There's so much to ask there. I want to start, though, by asking, why did you do it on your own?
Good question. Well, mainly because obviously a tent's a very small space. I'd experienced that on expedition with going with a group of people, and my initial plan was to kind of do a team expedition to the South Pole. But I realised how important it is to get on with your tent mates, and I've got lots of really good friends. Sadly, none of them really shared the idea of wanting to go to the South Pole. So then I thought, well, if I do go with someone, it's going to be someone that I don't necessarily know so well. I really wanted to kind of have that feeling of isolation, and I'm a bit of a people pleaser when it comes to sharing a tent, so I'll try and make myself as small as possible, and I knew that I'd compromise in lots of ways in terms of what time I'd want to get up. I didn't want any of those compromises. I wanted it to kind of be my expedition and do it my way, and that was, I didn't want to be the reason for someone's expedition to fail, and likewise I didn't want that to happen the other way around. So I was interested with it, and yeah, I need some more friends that want to do the same crazy stuff as me.
So among your friends and family, not mentioning anybody who might be present, were there some who went, yeah, we can get behind that, great idea, and were there others who went, Kat, you're an idiot, that's crazy, you can't be doing that?
I think lots of people just didn't believe I was going to do it,
right.
As in that I wasn't being serious at the beginning. You could see it in the faces, or they'd be like, yeah, she's not really going to go for it. But you also got that kind of, that you knew when people believed that you could do it, and you knew when people really didn't, just from the actions that the interest that they took or didn't take. And that was almost a bit of a drive when I came across somebody that would kind of nod their head but think is capable of doing it, and the stubborn McAvoy trait that's in me, thank you, Dad, would kick in, and that would really kind of make me more likely to.
Okay, so we're going to wander around with the mic while we're getting ready for the first one, which is over in the left-hand corner there, Paul. When you're on polar bear watch with everyone, when you're on your training, you're out there spending an hour and a half looking for polar bears. What on earth do you do if you see one? I mean, do you go, eat me, or eat him, or what do you do?
I saw loads. My imagination's terrible. I basically say, if it's white, it's not a polar bear. A polar bear will look grey in the landscape. I had my first polar bear watch, and within 5 minutes, I'm like, I think that's one there. I think it's moving. And then I'd be like, should I wake somebody up? Where's the rifle? And then it wouldn't move, so I thought, I'll give it a few minutes, see if it gets closer. And then I'd be like, oh, I think there's something over there. And for a whole hour and a half, I was exhausted because I genuinely thought I saw all these polar bears. But you wake up the person with a rifle. That's basically plan A.
That's good advice. Wake up the person with the rifle. Okay.
We didn't have enough ammunition, unfortunately, either. So,
you didn't have enough ammunition?
No. So at the very beginning, you had to test the ammunition, and we had 2 types. And she went to test it, and they were like, "Everyone, close your ears. It's going to be really loud." And it just went. Oh, we're like, oh, that's a bit dodgy. So it's okay. We'll just try another one. And we worked out that half of the ammunition was dud, so we only had 4 bullets then for the whole trip. And the guy just turned around and said, change of plan, guys, shoot to kill. Because normally you would shoot to kind of scare them away. Yeah. We haven't got enough ammunition, shoot to kill. Straight away, I was like...
But did you see any?
We only saw the footprints, thankfully. Yeah.
Okay.
And they were going across that way, and we were
the other way. That way. Yeah, good. Okay, if you could give your name before, and then ask the question.
It's me, Laura. I know that you listen to things like podcasts and music throughout. What was the song at that moment that you were like, I needed that, this is a sign?
I had quite a few. I have a song that generally gets me through my life, but when I'm away anywhere, people will hear that song and kind of leave a voice message, and that's Salt and Pepper's Push It. I would, on my worst days, start that, take the tent down with that, kind of keep going, push it. But there were some surprises in my playlist, because Spotify and everything, it all stops after 30 days. I knew it would stop. I had like a backup music that was on my phone that I had on there for I don't know how long, and it was really random. So I got caught by surprise a few times, and there was one particular power rock ballad that all of a sudden the energy just came back to me when I heard it, because it came as such a surprise. And that was one of the, I can't remember who it was, but I won't sing for you now.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, it's amazing. The power of music was actually really incredible. It had the ability to take you one of 2 ways. So it was really important, actually, having the right music to keep you motivated.
Great question, Laura. Okay, who else? Who's next? Oh, we're keeping you busy.
Hello there, my name's Steve. Your sled that you pulled, it kept on falling over. It didn't seem a very good design. Is there one design, or did you have a choice?
You have got, there tend to be, people do it in 2 ways. So sometimes you'll have 2 smaller sleds, which you put bags on, or some of the Norwegians would put skis on the bottom of the sled, but then it creates other weak points. There's no good way. No one seems to have mastered the way of getting it not to tip. As I said, it did get better once you could kind of move the weight around, but no, there wasn't really any good way. If you've got 2 pulks, the problem then is when you're going around to Strugies, one will tip and the other one won't, and you can't. And the good thing about my sled is that it's 2.1 meters long. If I did lose my tent, in an emergency I could zip myself into my pulk. Whereas if I had smaller ones, there's more risk of things getting blown away, and I wouldn't have that as an extra kind of security, safety measure.
What with the crevasses and the polar bears and the wind and the frostbite, weren't you scared?
I had no choice. I kind of, in those moments...
Yeah, you really did actually have a choice. You didn't have to do this.
Greenland, I have to say, Greenland was really, really tough, especially coming off that ice fall and being roped up. But what we did was we put the guy at the front that didn't mind falling in a crevasse. So Herman, Iceland, very generously volunteered to be the one at the front. I kind of said I'd maybe go third or fourth, nearer the back. So if the person goes down at the front, then you all have to kind of go either way, kind of fall to the side before you then go and rescue him. So I didn't feel scared that I was going to personally be the one that goes down the crevasse at those times, but it was more the wind, yeah. I don't know if I was scared. I was just kind of thinking, I want this to end. But that was kind of more my thinking. I never felt that I wasn't going to make it. I was worried about injuries to my hands especially. But
once you're on your own, there's no Herman to chuck down the crevasse, is there? It's just you. So.
Yeah, I honestly thought for this expedition that it was kind of meant to happen, that it was meant to be. I'd come across so many challenges and things had happened that had, like the stars had aligned to help me get, in terms of my funding, in terms of getting better and doing all my training. There were certain moments that I thought, well, I didn't doubt that it was going to happen in a way. So I didn't see that. I just wouldn't let myself imagine that happening, and that hadn't already happened. So just that belief that it was meant to be, I get there safely. I've always felt like I've had this bubble around me that kind of stops me from getting into any real danger.
Okay. And anybody else? Yep, there's two in the middle here.
I think Steve's going to be sled making over the weekend. Matthew first.
Matthew, how close were you to running out of supplies, food, at the end?
This is the great kind of ending to my story, is that I'd managed to ration 56 days worth of food, and I finished in 53 days. So for my last day, or last 2 days when I knew I was going to get there, I literally ate my way to the pole. I had I was stopping off to eat noodles. I had a hot water bottle. I had extra hot drinks during the day. I was really having quite a party on my last couple of days. So there was a benefit. After all that sacrifice, it actually felt really good. So I had an extra spare 3 emergency days if I needed it.
Eleanor, you've talked a lot, obviously, about the massive challenges, not just the physical side, but the mental side of it as well. So as part of your training with your endurance coach, were there things in your training that he did in terms of mental preparation as well? So we've talked, I know you talked tire dragging, everything else, but in terms of the mental preparation, how much did he feed in, or did you have other strategies, other training, I suppose, essentially for the psychological side of that, and what did that involve?
I looked into this because I wanted to know as well. A lot of it was reading other people's stories, people that had hallucinated, and kind of almost preparing myself that that might happen. They were doing those tire drags. They were long tire drags, 5 hours at a time, and that was a way of using it. How was I going to use that time? Where did my mind drift to? They say if you've got any demons, they will come to you in Antarctica because you can't not think about them. So I was just aware during my training, what did I tend to think about? Someone had said that their strategy should be that when you're on these days that you should focus in on a room in your house and imagine every little bit of where everything is placed so that your mind's occupied. That just sounded so boring to me. But there was no one really knew. It was very much, I'd go for a run and there'd be a section that coach had put in for mindfulness. So whilst you were running that section, you weren't just going through the motions, you were actively taking in the energy from your surroundings and things like that. But there was no one really knew how to do it. I tried.
Just while we were on the food issue, what did you actually have for lunch and dinner?
I didn't have a lunch as such. During the day, it was just snacks. So at dinner, I'd have a freeze-dried meal. that might be, I'm a pescatarian, so I don't tend to eat meat. I didn't have meat on the expedition. There's only a limited choice of fish dishes. My favourite one, it doesn't sound nice, but fish and potato was really nice, but there's a lot of repetition in the evening, and it's the texture that was a bit, everything just was mush because you just add water. So you really valued like chocolate and things every day that you could kind of crunch into, and Pringles. I don't normally eat any crisps, but they were quite a good snack. But during the whole day, I would just snack. So I'd have a porridge, like a porridge mix in the morning that I'd made up with salt, sugar, extra. If there's any leftover chocolate, that goes in that as well. But during the day, it's just snacking.
Sorry, I interrupted somebody down here. Yeah.
The name is Dave. I'm interested for the future. Do you foresee that these exhibitions that you embarked on are going to get like Everest has become? I think early on you said about authorities and getting approval, which obviously the company that was made sure technically that you were fit for everything that needed to be done. But I don't think there's any overall authority on Antarctica, is there?
Not necessarily.
There's no. So who actually controls the total situation for you? Do you have to get some form of bureaucratic approval or beyond the private company that does all the vetting?
Well, that company is the only company that you're able to get a flight to do those expeditions. It is becoming more of a they are a business.
Yeah.
So whilst there might not be as many people like me, there are certainly people that are doing what we call the last degree, which is where you fly to the last 100 kilometres, 120 kilometres, and you ski to the South Pole from that part. That's definitely gone on the rise. They do all the nods in the right direction in terms of looking after the environment as best they can. I think they're definitely learning things from Everest and keen for that not to happen.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's a lot of flights going on that.
So do we have visions of the queues that go up Everest, going from some 100 kilometres out from the South Pole, going to it?
Thankfully, there's a lot more space out there. And when you go 100 kilometres, you've got the whole circumference there, so they don't tend to see each other. But it's become more popular. Even, I say I'm the 13th woman, but up until 2019, only 7 women had done it. So already you're seeing an increase because people are seeing people like me doing it. So it is definitely an increase. And the unfortunate thing for me that I think now is that I'm going to be the last expedition that will be able to really be truly isolated. So I had, my phone didn't work in terms of no access to internet. As of next year, they say Elon Musk's Starlink has arrived in Antarctica. Oh. So these expeditioners, if they want to, they would be able to have that communication now. And certainly with sponsors, it's going to be quite difficult to kind of stop the sponsors wanting you to do.
When you mention the name Elon Musk, that devastates us all, I think.
We have one here. Mr. Colkett, good evening.
I'm Rupert. What did you learn about yourself through doing this? Because you've got all that time in the most extreme circumstances, brought to the very edge of, your coping mechanisms. As you look back on it, who are you now as a result of doing that?
Oh, I could go deep, or I could go from. On the light-hearted side, I realised just how fixated I was with the 90s. I really loved my childhood growing up here. I literally every day would go through from my childhood everything that I'd done, so 90s music, everything. I realised I'm a bit of a 90s freak. It served as kind of a validation. I've always said, one of the reasons I got one of the sponsors I did was that I've always believed that I could do this. It was other people that needed convincing, and it's kind of given me that validation. So that's given me a confidence, whereas before I always felt like I was, if people didn't believe me, I didn't really try and change their minds. You just kind of stay quite quiet. Now I feel like I don't need to stay so quiet anymore. I've proved it, and it's actually, I feel like a confidence that I didn't have that. But apart from that, I think I knew myself pretty well, and so I learned that actually I knew when I reacted certain ways to the difficulties, it wasn't necessarily a surprise, and that I'm actually quite a solid person. mentally.
Did it change your closest relationships? I mean, you know, I'd say that because I interviewed once a guy who rowed across the Atlantic on his own. And I was there at the quayside when he met his girlfriend, when he got off the boat. And she'd been telling me that he was going to settle down now. And as he got off the boat, I could see that he'd become some kind of demigod, and because of this thing that he'd achieved, and the relationship was over. Yeah. And it was dreadful to watch, which is why I'm asking you.
The reason my husband isn't here today isn't because of that. Luckily, he knew who he was marrying. My dad gave him a very good speech on my wedding day as to you'll either be going to these crazy places or not. I'd spent a lot of time in the years up to that being his cheerleader. He likes ultramarathons, and I felt I'd given a lot of my all to him succeeding, and now this was the chance kind of him to do the same for me. And it's been really good for our relationship because we're not necessarily the best communicators, and you end up communicating a lot more when you're not together in a way. And he could show that he was proud of me, which I don't see normally, and other people would say what he'd said about me, and I'd be like, oh, he never told me that. So actually it's been great. To start with, it was brilliant, he thought, because it meant that he could go off on lots of lads' holidays. He was like, you have to go to Norway training, I get to go skiing with my friends. And so to start with, he was loving it. Now he's ready to go on a holiday together. But we're very independent. We don't know each other, and don't know, very independent people, but work very well together as a team. So it seems to work. He is still here.
Fingers crossed. Okay.
Can I ask a question slightly related to that? Well, I've got the mic. There are exactly 100 people here, because I counted, and 99 don't know exactly really what it was like for you to do all that you did. How, having gone through that extraordinary experience, how will you relate to the 99% of the population when you're in a queue at Sainsbury's and people complain about the price of beans going up a penny or two? When we queue at the petrol station, we're annoyed because somebody's taking 5 minutes too long. When something mundane that bothers the hell out of us stupidly, you must now hear and see that and think you haven't got a clue, and yet you have still got to relate to the rest of humanity that hasn't been through your extreme experience. So how are you finding that, or how will you do that?
I think things like that I've had experience of when I've done sort of voluntary work abroad and like humanitarian work, in that you come back and, you know, someone's walked for a week to reach you with, you know, what they think is a tooth problem, and it turns out to be like a big carcinoma, and then you've got someone that's had to wait 24 hours with a chipped tooth that's might be a bit sharp on the tongue, and they're giving you hell because of this, and you're sort of going, whoa, and you can't help but recount the story and let them think about their own thoughts. But that does tend to wear off as well, I find. So you have that perspective to start with, and then after a certain amount of time, you get sucked back in again. And I think that's what again, which is why I'm always keen to get that perspective back in some other way. I just let things go over my head, to be honest. I know that when you're out there, you're very, very small and very insignificant. So I really just, if anything, I don't put that on anybody else. It's more on me that I don't get stressed by the small stuff.
Thank you.
Do you think we can ask a question of Mum and Dad? Oh, you've got a question there. We're going to come to you in a minute then. And my question is going to be, how worried were you and how proud are you? That's the real BBC Sport question. How proud are you? Anyway. But yes, this lady first.
Hello, I'm Julie. I just wondered if you could explain how you made sure you were walking in the right direction.
Do you know, one of my biggest fears was that the plane would be sort of going away and they'd look down and they'd be like, hang on a minute, she's gone the wrong way. Genuinely, that was one of my fears. You do lots of navigation training. You have to know how to read a bearing on a compass. So I had a GPS unit that I'd plotted a route. When I say I've plotted a route, there are waypoints that you navigate to. The final 1,000 kilometres, there are only 3 waypoints. And every morning I would check my GPS unit and it would give me a bearing that I'd have to put on my compass to that waypoint. I'd then turn the unit off because you need to save batteries. And I would just follow that compass bearing as best as I could on the landscape. And then every couple of hours, I'd turn my GPS on again just to make sure I'd not gone way off. And that assured me that I was going in the right direction.
Okay, let's do Mum and Dad. So how worried were you and how proud are you?
Well, at first when she mentioned it, I didn't really believe she was going to do it.
He was worried.
We would never ever have suggested or encouraged her in the first place. But once she made her mind up, we did get behind it, partly I think because we recognised the incredible preparation that she was going through, all the various possible problems that she would face, the training that she did, the day after day after day. We could see that she would be as well prepared as anybody possibly could. And so I personally, I don't know about Joyce, but I never worried throughout the whole expedition, apart from the time when I started working out the kilometres and how much she was going to have to do a day. But yeah, she proved that she could do it, and yes, we're very, very proud of what she's achieved. But we don't want to know what's next in life.
No, we're certainly proud of what she's done. I was a little bit worried from time to time, particularly when she had that bad day. And those sastruges, just thinking about it, it must have been very, very difficult for you. But you've made it. Well done.
When you've got a family of 4, when you've got brothers and sisters, you learn that they don't let one of you shine. You always have to share everything and be fair for everything. So, yeah.
But what have they done? They've not been to the South Pole, have they?
Nick, when you arrived at the South Pole, how much further did you have to ski to get back to base camp?
So at the South Pole, they've got a little camp there. That's because there are these other expeditions that come in at the last degree expeditions. You reach that camp before you actually reach the South Pole. So I've made very aware that you can give people a hug, but you've not reached the South Pole yet, so you cannot take any food off them. Otherwise, you'll lose your unsupported status. And it's about another kilometre to the South Pole, and there's a geographic South Pole, which is the actual South Pole, which they move every year. And then there's the ceremonial pole, which is the one with the flags. So you go to both. The ceremonial pole used to be the South Pole in the 80s, but the glacier's moved, so it's getting further away. And then you wait at this little camp. I waited, I think, a day and a half until there were enough people that arrived there to then get on a Basler World War II rustic-looking plane that's not pressurised. It's about a 4-hour flight back to the base camp. Then you don't have to ski back.
Interesting. Yeah.
I probably don't need the microphone, I've got a very loud voice. Andy is my name. I think we heard there's 100 people in this room, so that's probably 100 people with a new sports hero in yourself. Certainly you're a new sports hero of mine. Who are your sports expedition heroes?
One of them was definitely Liv Arneson, who was the first woman to ski solo to South Pole. She actually left me a really nice voice message, a video message for my launch night, kind of recounting her expedition and how the differences she had. She actually wrote poetry every day on her, which she encouraged me to do, but it didn't happen. So she's definitely one of mine. Who else? I'm kind of really respectful of all of those people that aren't necessarily, or not necessarily the professional athletes, but the ones that are having to work their training around a full-time job. I realised doing this was one of the hardest things, was having to work harder than I ever had done to kind of fund things and fit the training around it. So when you look at, say, like the women's football teams and things like that, a lot of these women are really passionate about their sport, which gets them where they are. They're still having to have a full-time job because they don't get the same funding as other athletes. So some of those are definitely sporting heroes that I look up to.
I think you said Mrs. Taylor was your geography teacher. What would she say to you?
Well, her son said she'd be bouncing off the walls with excitement at it all. I can't think what she would say to me, but I can just imagine how she would be. I was up in North Wales this week, and that was one of the places that we had one of my first geography field trips. And again, it's like she's there because everything I see, I remember her kind of showing me. So it was just, I don't know what she'd say, I just know that she would be this ball of energy.
I think we've got time for one more question, have we? At the back there, yeah.
Dave, hi. Having spent so long in such incredibly cold temperatures, how is your relationship with cold now? Since you've got back, how does it feel different, or is it still just cold?
No, I really hate the cold. That's the thing about this, is that it's not just the cold. Like you're kitted out for the cold. You still feel cold every time you stop. You have to start moving, which is why my breaks were so short. But it's a different cold. You come back to the UK, and I realised that I'd not had rain for all that time, and the difference it made. Like as soon as you step out, and you've got one of those dark, grey, drizzly days. Like, oh, this is what I really don't enjoy. Whereas there, you'd obviously get bad weather, but you still had the brightness and the lightness. I really get told off every time I say I'm cold. I try not to say it, but I do say it a lot. And my coldest place, I think, is in my living room sometimes. I've got the blankets, and it's a cold house. But it's good for the training. But yeah, I don't like the cold.
I think we'll have to wrap up. We've got the buckets for the collection. You've got the QR code up there if you need it too. But I'll leave it to Paul to say thank you.
Thank you. Cole, thank you very much for looking after this part of the evening. I don't know anybody else who could have done this part of the evening but you, so thank you for giving us your time and your experience and your interviewing for this. And Kat, thank you for answering those random questions with no...
I don't know if I did I?
You did. Some of them very practical, some of them very mundane about your reality, and some of them very deep, and some of them very difficult about you as a person. So thank you for your honesty and for answering all of those. Can we give Kat another round of applause, please?
Oh, thank you very much.
Flowers, and then a polar white, and Cole. Chocolate, probably the same variety that were in the daily supply kit as well. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one last question? Have you had a margarita since being back in the UK, and was it as good as that one that you had in the South Pole?
I might have had more than one. I was very aware that rum is really like the expedition drink, and I thought it was about time that tequila came to the Antarctica.
I see.
Yes, it'll never taste as good as that did.
I'll bet, with Arctic ice. Thank you very much again for coming. I hope you've had a fabulous evening. I hope you've learned a lot. I hope that you'll leave this place somehow with your minds and hearts expanded as to what you've heard Kat talk about with her experiences. The baskets at the back. Feel free to stay around and chat a little bit longer as well. If you're lucky, Kat will stay a little bit longer to chat too. She's unpacking. Have a lovely rest of the evening, and see you all again.
Yes.